So I'm delighted to be here. My topic is data as an industrial resource. Essentially, this is a compression of my one semester course into 7 minutes, so I'm going to speak fast. But the issue that we explore in my course, which is called Big Data in Marketing, is what is the shape of the industry that is emerging using data as its raw material. So data-driven industries are very different to industries founded on steel or coal or grain or the standard conception of a physical resource. And what can we learn about the shape that they're taking? In particular, what we'll do in the discussion is look at winners and losers, how much concentration, how big will the winners be, how dispersed, and particularly how sustainable, how robust, how resilient. We've seen a century in which industries tended to be pretty resilient. Rockefeller discovered oil before the internal combustion engine, built an enterprise that to this day, in the form of ExxonMobil, is extremely powerful, one of the largest corporations in the United States. Will that happen around data? That's a question that interests me. I use as my text this comment by Larry Summers that data may be to the 21st century what oil was to the 20th, a hugely valuable asset essential to economic life. If we could do what Rockefeller did and acquire control of the sources of this raw material, then our great-great-grandchildren can become millionaires at birth, as his do. But I doubt that that's the way things work with data. What is data? I've got a little litany here, which I think I'll go through in the breakout rather than take your time here. But this thing called data is not just data. It's data with particular properties and particular methods of assembly. The empirical work that I'll be relying on is based on 5 studies that you see here. I should acknowledge Leora Kornfeld, who was a part of the project team for these studies. What we did was try to put a dollar value on the value of the internet. And as you see, in 2008, we thought it was about a $300 billion activity, which almost doubled in 4 years, and then more than doubled in the following 4 years. In other words, the internet is growing at about 20% a year, every year, and possibly even accelerating. So it's behaving like an infant industry. It's looking like something that's going to get a lot bigger than it is even today. And then in the 2 remaining studies, what we did was we looked at how much of that internet value is employing personal data, the kind of data that we conventionally describe as creepy, the kind of data that is vulnerable to regulation, but is also remarkably important to the operation of the market-making function. And there we see that it's making up something like a third of, the scales are not directly comparable, but about a third of the activity that makes up the internet is in fact concerned with participating in the personal data economy, and that has grown by something like a doubling. And what is the implication of all of that? Well, that this emerging industry has a structure. The structure, I think, is relatively robust, and it consists, as you might expect, of 4 layers, a hard infrastructure of pipes and transmission technologies, a soft infrastructure of software and services that support what's flowing in the hard infrastructure layer, consumer support services, because the internet I'm concerned with is the internet of market making. It's the commercial internet. It's not the internet used for other purposes. And so there are an important set of both advertising-related functions and search-related functions that support, as it were, the leaves and flowers of the tree, the consumer services at the top, which are the ones that we interface with quite frequently. This structure is robust even though the activities at each level of the structure are very fluid. So for example, at the infrastructure level, the backbone and branch structure is giving way to the edge provider kind of a structure, and similar transformations are occurring at all levels as the uses and opportunities of data change. But what's really provocative in my view, and what exercises us a lot in my course, is a deviation from the simple sandwich structure in which a small set of firms are emerging as integrated firms. They're either integrating from the top down, as Google and Facebook are, or integrating from the bottom up, as potentially Verizon and Comcast are, or in some cases from the middle, as IBM and Oracle are. But in every case, I think I would argue that they are trying to monopolize the information, the set of information industries. And the question, that it's hard to have a monopoly with 6 or 8 competitors is the thrust of what I'm interested in here. How is that battle going to play out? Are we condemned, or are we happy to live in a world in which Google continues to dominate the world of data for another 2 generations? Or are we seeing through actions that the FCC has taken that something like Verizon, with its acquisition of AOL and Yahoo, is a significant rival to the claim? We're going to look at it in terms of a kind of a tension between walled gardens and the open web. Walled gardens in the sense that what happens in the garden stays in the garden, but the garden is quite happy to have people throw balls into the garden. They just never come out again. And that is the game that is currently being played by the set of companies listed on the left-hand side. As by our calculations, the walled gardens today are about $340 billion of the internet's value. The remainder is the value of the open web. The walled gardens are oligopolies. They control data. They control the products that are generated with that data, and they're all vendor-type products, so they're all used by people outside of the commercial web to perform services, whereas the open web is a self-organizing ecosystem. It's incredibly complex. It's very fluid. It is the locus of, essentially, I would say, all entrepreneurship in the internet. Sure, there are ideas within the walled gardens, but they don't have the fertility, the potential for surprise that you get from the open web. So in the walled garden, each of those players controls its own data, whether that data comes from retail, as with Amazon, or from social media with Facebook, or from search and so on. So there's a source of data in every case. Those data sources are expanding to the extent that they're capable of expanding, whereas the open web is a world of data trading. Instead of creating your own data, you're essentially creating an ecosystem in which data flows from one company to another. I think that has the important implication for regulation, that the walled gardens are first-party entities and hard to regulate. They can do a lot of stuff that makes politicians uncomfortable, whereas everything that's happening in the open web is dependent on the free flow of data, on third-party data, and therefore particularly vulnerable to regulation. And so as I see it, and this again is open to debate, if we get intense regulation, particularly of personal data, we put a dead weight on innovation, and we facilitate the progressive growth of the oligopolies. Just to compare their relative sizes right now, these are the integrators. As you see, Apple is the number 1, and Facebook is really quite tiny on this scale. But if you relate their US internet revenues, so these are not numbers you can find in published sources, these are our calculations, but you compare those to market caps, you find that what the market really thinks is going on is that Amazon, Alphabet, and Facebook are the dynamic entities, leaving tremendous buying opportunities for people who want to bet on Verizon. This is the kind of question I want to look at in the session. Right now, who's winning? Sure, it's pretty clearly one of the walled gardens, but which one? Is it? I think there's a tough debate between Amazon and Google, with Facebook as a good outside runner. But will this model continue? Is the walled garden model going to remain the model that drives the industrialization of data over the next few generations? Or do you think the resilience of the open web gives it a better shot? There's an important skills question. So does skill move to the incumbents, the walled gardens, or does skill move toward the entrepreneurial opportunities? I've raised already the question of data regulation. And finally, my argument is, so just to declare my position, that what's happening in marketing, and what has been happening in marketing for about 20 or 30 years, is a precursor to the emergence of data industries in other verticals. So what we've done in marketing is a model for what fintech will do, for what healthcare will do, for what other disruptable industries will do. And each of them will follow a pattern that we see in marketing. Okay, thanks very much.